Are Google's proposed Android changes an epic victory for users or only for Tim Sweeney?
And is it finally time to say goodbye to Google Assistant?
I'm Mishaal Rahman.
And I'm C. Scott Brown, and this is the Authority Insights podcast where we break down the latest news and leaks surrounding the Android operating system.
So, Scott, we may finally be nearing the end of the Epic v. Google lawsuit. That lawsuit that began way back in 2020 during the height of the pandemic. Google and Epic have been embroiled in this controversy for many years, but they have finally agreed to settle their lawsuit after Google committed to making several sweeping changes to the Android operating system as well as the Google Play Store. These changes will not only make the Android app ecosystem more competitive, but they will also improve the availability of applications for users, potentially also reducing prices for users. But whether or not they'll really benefit anyone other than Epic remains to be seen.
Yeah, and while Google's big changes come as a surprise, what's not surprising is the demise of Google Assistant. We've recently spotted the first clues that Google is killing off Assistant on Android. We've known it would happen for a long time now, pretty much ever since Bard came along. If anyone listening to this can remember Bard. But are we really ready to say goodbye to Google Assistant? And should you say goodbye to your current device and upgrade to one with the upcoming Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5? That's the question we set out to answer in our in depth benchmarking of the new chip in one of the most powerful gaming phones out there.
But before we dive into those benchmarks, let's first dive deep into the biggest story of the week by far. And it's the fact that Google and Epic have finally reached an agreement to settle their lawsuit. So this agreement, to be clear, hasn't been finalized. The judge still has to sign off on it, but this agreement that they have reached has a lot of big changes coming to Android in the Play Store. So for a bit of context, on Tuesday evening, Samir Samat and Team Sweeney they jointly announced on their X accounts that they have reached an agreement, and they published a legal document. And we poured through this document to actually find out what are the terms that they have agreed to. So, for a little bit of context, this is the near finalization of the lawsuit that began in 2020 when Google kicked Fortnite off the Play Store because Epic had tried to implement an alternative payment option within Fortnite alongside Google Play Billing. And for those of you who don't know, that is not allowed right now. At least before this changes that Google is proposing to make, you are only allowed to have Google Play Billing as an option, as a payment option within applications. If you're at least if you're buying something digital, like I don't know, a loot box or something in a game, or a skin, or a cosmetic, or a lot of different things that are purely digital. Um, but Epic has basically argued for a very long time that this is monopolistic. That Google should allow developers to show alternative payment methods alongside Google Play Billing, that they shouldn't be allowed to pay OEMs to bundle the Google Play Store and all these other applications, that they shouldn't be able to basically pay off companies and prevent them from launching their apps on alternative app stores, that all these sorts of things that Google's been doing for years to kind of solidify its dominance. Epic has argued that Google should not be allowed to do this. And they won their lawsuit. Like, Epic actually won their lawsuit, and Google was in the midst. They were about to be forced to make a lot of changes that they would not have liked to have made. But before that, we reached the point before they were forced to make changes they didn't want to make. They reached an agreement with Epic earlier this week, and these agreements were jointly agreed upon by both companies. So there's a lot of things that probably Google doesn't want to implement, but this is the best that they can work with considering the alternative. So some of the things that Epic and Google have agreed to is that basically Google will finally put third-party app stores on equal footing with its own Play Store. So a future Android release will add support for something called registered app stores. These are basically certified stores that can be installed with a single click, and once you do, they are automatically granted the permission to install other apps. Another thing is that Google can no longer stop OEMs from pre-installing third-party app stores or placing them on the home screen. Google will no longer pay off companies that want to build their own Play Store competitors. Google won't impose any fees on running a third party app store or charge for any downloads originating from those third party app stores. And they are also giving developers more freedom in terms of what app store they want to launch their application on. For example, Apps can now show an alternative payment option side by side with Google Play billing. And as you can see in the screenshot, this is the thing that Epic tried to implement in Fortnite, which got them kicked off. This is now going to be allowed going forward. Um, Google, however, can still take a service fee on transactions that are completed using alternative payment options, but they are no longer allowed to block devs from communicating to users about those alternative options. So if a developer wants to send you an email or a notice inside the application, they're free to do so. And finally, Google can no longer pay developers to favor the Play Store for new application launches, but they can basically strike deals with developers to say, hey, if you want to launch on Android first, we can give you some kind of incentive to do that. But developers will still have the opportunity to choose which Android app store they want to launch on. So there's a lot of things are changing with Android and the Google Play Store. So if you want the full details, a full breakdown of everything that's changing, I highly recommend you go check out this 2,000 word article that I wrote on Android Authority because that is all the intricate details. So we're not gonna like dive into those details, but I kind of wanted to talk about the implications of these changes because they are massive. And I think one of the biggest things that kind of struck people is that we have this sense that Google is being forced to open up Android. They're opening up Android and making it more viable for third-party app stores to compete with the Google Play Store. But at the same time that these changes are going to affect next year we're also getting those new Android developer verification requirements that a lot of people are saying will basically kill sideloading. So, Scott, what do you think of this kind of dichotomy with like Google kind of opening up Android more to app store developers versus kind of closing it down for indie developers? Like, what do you think is going on here? Is this an example of Google giving with one hand and taking from the other? This is basically create a corporate oligopoly where the big name players like Epic can thrive with their own alternative marketplaces, whereas small indie communities like F Droid will suffer. So, like, what do you think of this dynamic?
I I think we need to take like a step back and look at the macro picture for this whole situation and understand two things. Uh Epic won. Like Epic won this fight big time. Like the reason that Google is settling is because like you said, it knows that if it lets the courts decide on what is a realistic compromise for the situation, the courts are going to do things that Google definitely does not want to do. And all the things that you listed on that list are things that Google doesn't want to do, but they're better than the things that the court would impose on them.
Oh
But
yeah.
there is no question Google lost. Meanwhile, Apple faced a similar situation and Apple got away in much better fashion. So what I think is happening here is I don't really think it's necessarily Google, like you said, giving with one hand and taking away with the other. I think it's Google just sort of understanding that if it wants to be less vulnerable to these types of situations, it needs to go with the way that is the less vulnerable. And it's being proved in the courts that Apple's way makes it less vulnerable. Why? That is the big question. Like, why is it that Apple's got away with this or didn't get away with it?
Hmm.
But why did Apple, not have to deal with nearly as much scrutiny as Google? And I think it comes down to the idea that Google's the perception of the Play Store and Android as an operating system is that it's completely open. It's this open source playground where anything goes. And the perception is that iOS and the App Store is not. It is locked down, very much controlled by Apple.
Yeah.
And a lot of arguments could be made that there's lots of things about Android that are locked down, and that maybe iOS isn't as locked down as maybe people think it is. But I think what Google is doing is looking and saying, okay, we lost big time, but Apple didn't. Maybe we should try to be more like Apple to protect our brand. Now, I'm sure Android fans are not happy about that, but in the end, Google has to do what makes the most, the most business sense and legal sense for them to do. And that just might be locking down the Play Store in some ways to accommodate these situations. I don't like it. I'm sure you don't like it, and I'm sure a lot of people listening don't like it, but I don't know. Like, what else is Google going to do? Is Google going to give control to the courts? Because then the courts are going to do things that don't make any sense for anyone. Like remember when Mark
Yeah.
Zuckerberg had to explain to Congress how Facebook makes money? Like, that's the level of incompetence of how tech works that Google would have to deal with in this situation, and that's just not good. So yeah, Google's trapped. And you could argue that that they're in a trap of their own making, sure, but in the same sense, Google's trapped and it's got to do what it's got to do to get through this. And that's just going to mean a lot of compromises, a lot of things that Google doesn't want to do, and a lot of things that we're not going to like. But
Yeah.
that's where it is.
And keep in mind some of the alternative consequences that would have that the judge tried to impose on Google was basically they were going to require the Google Play Store to carry rival app stores. So like you could open the Google Play Store, search for Epic Games, and download the Epic Games Store through the Google Play Store for one. A second thing is they wanted to basically force Google to provide its entire app catalog. So like I guess like a database of all the apps available on it. I get all the reviews and things like that. Make that available through like an API that third party app stores could then tack onto. So basically if you want to launch a rival app store, you have access to by default almost everything that's listed on the Google Play Store. And then you can just add your own apps on top of that. Like those two things were I think, crazy overreaches, but they would certainly
Crazy.
be effective in bootstrapping a rival, an alternative to the Google Play Store. But I think like those two things went too far. So I think that's probably why Google agreed to these less harsh settlements that I think favor Epic heavily. Like these are the things that Epic really wants. Epic is basically they've wanted a more level playing field, but it does a lot of these things do benefit users and developers, but exactly how much they benefit them is debatable because, as I mentioned, there's still a service fee. For example, like Google can charge up to 20% service fee for transactions that are like that like affect gameplay. For example, if you like sell a loot box in an app in a game and use an alternative payment option, Google can take an up to 20% service fee. Now remember, that doesn't count the service fee that whatever additional provider you're using will actually take. So if you're using a credit card provider, that might be like an additional 3 to 5% service fee. So 23% service fee potentially for using alternative versus the 15% for the first $1 million and 30%. So like, are you really saving that much money by switching to alternative? So like, the benefits are not really as great for developers who still distribute apps through the Google Play Store, but want to take advantage of alternative payment options. But a lot of the benefits, a lot of the changes that Google's proposing do benefit people like Epic Games because, a lot of the things that Google is committing to make third-party app stores more viable to survive because Google can no longer basically discriminate against them. They can't disincentivize developers from launching their own games on the third-party app stores. They can't force OEMs to basically shunt them into some third dark corner of their home screen. They can't block OEMs from signing deals to preload these third-party app stores. They can't hide the installation and the usage of these third-party app stores behind like a 10-step install flow with like multiple warning screens about installing them. Like it's going to be a lot easier from now on to install and use third-party app stores. And who knows? Maybe within a few years, within the 6 years basically that Google's committing to maintaining these features, we'll eventually see third-party app stores with enough applications that people will actually want to keep them around on their devices and not just install for a single application. We might actually have a bunch of games that are exclusive to the Epic Game Store that people actually continuously keep it installed on the device just so they can get the latest and greatest games. And I mean, we're already kind of seeing that's Epic's MO on the PC side, launching a bunch of exclusive games, getting people to install their application. They're still not close to Valve and their Steam in terms of popularity, but they've made a pretty significant alternative on the PC side of things.
Yeah, I don't know. At what cost? Like, okay,
Yeah.
so 3 years from now, I'm gonna buy, a Samsung Galaxy phone, and it's gonna have the Play Store, the Galaxy Store, the Epic Game Store, the Amazon App Store, the whatever. It's gonna be like 20 store, and I'm gonna say to myself, okay, I want to buy the latest mobile game. Where do I go? Okay, let me open up the Play Store, do a search. Oh, no, it's not here. Let me go to Epic Games. Oh, no, oh, it's exclusive to the Galaxy Store now. Like, who wins, you know? I know Tim Sweeney wins,
Hmm.
and, like, I the one of the things that irritates me about this whole thing is that Tim Sweeney sees himself as, like, the guy standing up for the little guy. Like, he sees himself in this fight as being like, "I'm trying to help everyone by taking down the monopolistic tendencies of the Play Store and Google in general." But really, he's just out for Tim Sweeney. He just wants Epic Games to be bigger and he wants to make more money and do his thing. And so that kind of rubs me wrong. At least Google is like, oh yeah, we're a giant tech company that's trying to make as much money as possible. Like, we're ready to do whatever it takes to protect that. Tim Sweeney is like pretending that he's doing this for the little guy, and that kind of ticks me off. But anyway, that's besides the point. But really,
Yeah.
like, I don't know. Like, I feel like who like Google loses, Epic wins, and users are just fodder. We're cannon fodder in the middle of the fight. And that kind of sucks. Like, I don't feel like this is going to help anything. Like, you're still going to have to pay, a lot of money for your loot boxes and your mobile things, and this isn't going to drop prices for you at all. Like, what's going to happen is that a developer is going to say, okay, well, I can charge, whatever, $5 for this through the Play Store, or I could charge $4 through this other provider and save a little money for the user, or I could just charge $5 and get extra money and push
Yeah.
people to use the third party provider instead. So it's like, yeah, I mean, everyone is going to win at the top and nobody's going to win at the bottom. And that includes the people who are actually making the purchases. So yeah, I feel like it's a lose-lose situation. And the only thing that I can see is being like, oh, you win is Tim Sweeney and Epic Games. And that's, I guess, good for you, but this is hardly the win that he wants it to be. This is more, you know, you won your vendetta against Google. Great job. Congratulations.
I mean, on the bright side, like I don't think we're going to get the bad situation as you described, where we have like 10 different app stores that get different applications. Because I think the fact that we started out with a big centralized app store that everyone agrees is the place to go, the Google Play Store, the fact that that's already existed, I think will kind of reduce the possibility of other rival general all-purpose app stores kind of kicking off. Because I think if you look at like the Chinese market, for example, there was no centralized Google Play Store to kind of like be the go-to place where all developers and all users go for all their applications. So every single Chinese OEM made their own app store, and all their big Chinese tech companies made their own app stores. So over there, you have like 10 different app stores, and of each of varying popularity. So there's a lot of different places for people to get applications. But here in out in the rest of the world, you have the Google Play Store. You have a couple of other app stores that have tried to become general purpose app stores, like the Amazon App Store. But of course, they really failed to catch on. But that was before these changes have come into effect, to be fair. But even so, I still think the vast majority of developers will continue to contribute their apps to the Play Store. And even those that do launch their apps on, say, the Epic Game Store, they're probably not going to do it um, in perpetuity, like exclusively on those app stores. They'll probably eventually bring them to the Google Play Store. So long as like a couple of months after maybe signing an exclusive deal with Epic Games. Like I don't think it's gonna be such a bad situation. Like some people are worried about.
I totally agree that that's not going to happen. But at the same, but it could.
Yeah, it
This
could.
opens the door for that kind of thing. Um, and yeah, like, I'm a PC gamer, and as a PC gamer, I hate it. I hate when I want to play Red Dead Redemption that I have to install a third party, platform just to play it, just so they can
Yeah.
collect my data or do whatever they want to do. Like, I hate it. And so it's like, now all Epic Games is doing is making it so that that's the reality on Android as well. And and yeah, like, there's nothing stopping that. The floodgates are now open. Like, these multiple app stores that all have to integrate with one another and confuse the user. It's there. Um, I mean, I don't know. Like, yeah, I guess it is nice that that Google's going to have more competition. Maybe this is going to make the Play Store be better. Maybe this is
Hmm.
going to make Google be better about enticing app developers to do things on Android first, and to just make the Android experience better, because Google's now going to have to say, how can we make it so that app developers don't go to Epic Games and don't go to these other places, and we can't just pay them off anymore. Like, we actually have to work hard to entice them to come over. that sounds great, but is it gonna be worth it? I don't know. I guess I'm just pessimistic about it, because of the PC gaming experience, because, you know, of what I have to deal with when I wanna play,
Yeah.
whatever X game that I'm just like, "Ugh," like, I don't want to install this stuff. I just wanna play the game, you know?
I mean, on the flip side, on PC at least, when it comes to game options, you have a ton of options. When it comes to Android, there's a lot of games that are missing. Maybe this will lead to Epic throwing its billions of Fortnite dollars into, propping up Android gaming. Maybe they'll pay a lot of developers that previously wouldn't even consider
Yeah,
porting their games to Android to bring their games over to Android. It'll probably
yeah.
be an Epic Games exclusive or at least like a timed exclusive, but you'll actually have those games on Android now, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about it later in this episode, but yeah, I mean, the processors on Android flagship phones are more than capable. They are very, very powerful, and they could totally play a lot of those games. So yeah, that could be a silver lining for this for sure.
Yeah. But before we move on to the Snapdragon story, we wanted to briefly, play the small world's smallest violin and say goodbye to an old friend, Google Assistant, because it's been a long time coming. We knew it would eventually happen. Google is going to be killing off Assistant. Exactly the exact date this is going to happen, we don't know that. We know that it's going to happen later this year, but we have finally spotted our first concrete clues that Google is preparing to kill it off within the Google app on Android phones. So we found basically our Authority Insights team has found evidence that Google is doing away with the digital assistant from Google option within the Gemini app that allows you to switch between Gemini and the Google Assistant. So once that's gone, you'll no longer be able to switch back to the Google Assistant, and effectively locking you in to Gemini. Now, I know we both use Gemini, like we both have probably been using it for a very long time, but there are definitely still some listeners who have not switched over, and I know there are still people who are skeptical of Gemini. But I kind of want to gauge your thoughts. How do you feel about Gemini now that it's been a little almost 2 years since it launched?
I love it. I use Gemini every day. I use it for every day for all sorts of things. I use it as a brainstorming partner for our video ideas. I use it for thumbnail mockups. Like I'll come up with a thumbnail idea in my head, but I can't draw, so I'll just explain what I think the thumbnail should look like to Gemini, and it will create something that looks like my vision, and then I can replicate that easier when I'm actually taking the photo or doing whatever. Um, yeah, I use it to change emails. Like I'll write an email back, and sometimes I can be a little curt in my writing, so I'll feed it to Gemini, and I'll be like, you know, can you soften this for me? And it'll,
Uh huh.
so I all the time I use it, and it's in my smart home now. So like I'll ask questions. I'll be in the middle of cooking, and I'll say like, oh, I need to change this recipe in some way. Can you help me with this? And have a nice conversation with it. Like it all works well. And the thing that I find really ironic about Google Assistant is that for the past maybe 5 years, I feel like all anyone's ever done is complain about Assistant. And now Gemini's come in, and it is, I would say, objectively better than Assistant.
Hmm.
And now everyone's like, "Oh no, don't take Assistant away." I'm just like, you, which one is it? Like you wanted this for so long, and now so yeah. Like I will miss Google Assistant for certain like aesthetic reasons, like the Google Assistant voice. I've become accustomed to the voice, and I've become to accustomed to its strange inflection about things and how it says certain words, and it's become very familiar, especially in my home. It's like when I ask something about like turning the lights on or off or playing music or doing whatever, like I've become accustomed to this friendly voice that has a very specific type of tone, and that's going away with Gemini, and so I'll miss that. But in the end, Gemini is better than Assistant, and it's only
Yeah.
going to get better from here. So I'm all for it. I'm very happy. But yeah, I can understand how people would be upset about Assistant's eventual demise. But yeah,
I have a theory on why that is and why people have been so negative towards Gemini. And I think it's because, for a long time, as you mentioned, the quality of Google Assistant has just been degrading and degrading and degrading to the point where a lot of people just basically use their Google speakers as glorified timers or like alarm clocks or just to play some songs on Spotify. Like that's all they use it for. They don't actually use it as an intelligent assistant. They don't really ask many questions of it. Maybe they ask the weather, and like that's something that it can do well. But like a lot of other general purpose questions, kind of fails at. Just oh, I don't know the answer to that, or let me look that up, or here's a link to look it up on your phone. Um, but the issue is that when Google initially transitioned or asked people to make the move over to Gemini, they kind of botched the initial launch. A lot of the basic things that people had grown used to with the Google Assistant, the timers, the alarm clocks, the weather, and stuff like that, a lot of those just didn't work very well at the beginning. I know people were complaining a lot about timers, especially just not working at all. They eventually did add those stuff, and I haven't had any issues with them since they launched. But I think that initial impression that people got, the people who were really reliant on their Google smart devices for those basic features, were disappointed when they gave Gemini a shot when that transition initially opened up, and then they never looked back. They never tried it again after all those months. But if you do give it a shot, and you'll soon be forced to give it a shot because Google is closing down Google Assistant, you'll find that it handles all those basic tasks pretty well, and it can do so much more, especially conversationally, like the ability to basically just free flow, ask it, spew whatever is on your mind without really thinking about it, how to structure your query. It's just so much better with Gemini than it is with Assistant.
What this reminds me of a little bit is physical keyboards um, on phones. When
Oh
physical
yeah, yeah.
keyboards were the thing, and then the iPhone came out, and the iPhone obviously did not have a physical keyboard, and people hated it. They were like, "This is awful. Like, I can't feel the tactile presence of the keys. Getting to something like the comma is super difficult. The key presses aren't registered, too small." All these complaints, and people were like, "Why can't we just have a physical keyboard? Physical keyboards are better." But then digital keyboards got better and better and better. And now I feel like if you were to try to go back to a physical keyboard, 99% of people would be like, this is terrible. Like, I so miss
Oh
my
yeah.
digital keyboard. Granted, there are a select few people who still would rather have a physical tactile keyboard, and for them, there are all sorts of options and things like that, like clicks from Mr. Mobile and all that stuff. So that niche does exist, but it's a niche now. It's completely become the other way. It used to be that physical keyboards were everything everybody wanted, and they hated on-screen keyboards, and now it's completely flipped. And I think the same thing's going to happen with Gemini and Google Assistant. People are going to look back on Google Assistant, 5 years from now, somebody's going to dig out a phone that only still has Google Assistant on it. They're going to fire it up and they're going to ask a question and they're going to be like, "Oh my God, this thing's terrible," and people are going to be like, they're going to totally switch back to the way it is. The similar thing with physical keyboards. So I think that's where we're going to be. But this little in between section where the transition is happening, I think you're right. I think it's just going to be tough for some people to go through that change, but eventually they will. And just like with physical keyboards, they'll never look back.
Do we think that Google is going to actually stick to its end of 2025 timeline for killing Google Assistant? Because that was the timeline they gave us back in March when they confirmed that Gemini will fully replace Assistant. They said by the end of 2025, we will have Gemini on all devices that are capable of running Assistant. But we're pretty close to the end of the year, and they still haven't pulled the plug yet. And we are still seeing Gemini be integrated into more and more Google services like Maps, for example, or like Android Auto. It's just started to roll out. So like it seems like Google might hit its milestone pretty late in the year. Do we think they might just delay it until the early next year to give people more time to transition? What do you think?
No, I don't think they'll delay it. I think they'll just continuously do what you just described. They'll just be continuously putting Gemini into more things and then slowly taking Assistant away. I think that they could arbitrarily just be like, we hit our commitment by turning off the option to have Assistant in a certain major thing, whether that be Android phones or smartwatches or whatever. Like, they'll just be like, yep, we did it. We made the transition in this one area, and the rest of the time, we'll slowly get it all out for the rest. Yeah, I had no, there was no way that they were going to be like, Assistant will be gone across all platforms, by the end of 2025. That just
Yeah.
that's way too fast. They never were going to be able to do that. But yeah, but I feel like for most situations, it'll be pretty easy to make it so that you're just talking to Gemini all the time. It's already in the smart home. You have to opt in, I think, for now, but they could easily flip that switch and just be like, okay, everybody's now using Gemini. They
Yeah.
could easily do that in December and meet that goal. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I don't mind. To me, I'm just like, I'm not in any rush. Like, I'm using Gemini. I'm happy. It's available on all the things that I use it for, every day. Um, and yeah, I'm less and less reliant on Assistant. But so
Hmm.
yeah, I'm not I'm fine with the pace that we're going.
Although I'm kind of curious what's going to happen with Android TV and Android Automotive because there are a lot of cars and TVs that are barely receiving updates anymore, or they rarely receive updates, or their updates are just not controlled by Google. So how is Google going to push out Gemini onto those devices if they are doing so at all? And if not, are they going to keep Assistant running on those devices for years to come, or are they just going to eventually kill it off and say you can't access your voice assistant anymore on these devices because it's too old? So like, what are they going to do with TVs and cars?
I think that, I mean, I think that they could keep it going for quite a long time, but eventually, if they do shut it off and they're like, okay, you can't access Assistant anymore on this television or this car, I don't think that will necessarily like make it so that TV or that car all of a sudden is like not usable. Like
Hmm.
obviously all the functions of those TVs and cars will still be there. It's just that you won't be able to use your voice to activate them. And yeah, but I agree that it will suck for those people who own those things and are keeping them for a long period of time. It always sucks when a feature that was launched with a product is then taken away from you later on. But I think that Google could run those are both like very, very small things in the grand scheme of things.
Right.
There are very few cars on the road that have Android Automotive, at least comparatively to the wider automotive market. And there are probably more televisions that have Google TV, like older versions of Google TV built in old Google TV boxes and stuff like that. That's probably more of a hurdle for Google. But even then, like I feel like if they're only focused on those two niches, they could have Assistant run for quite a while before they'll eventually be like, okay, we have enough data now to show that only a fraction of the people left are actually using Google Assistant. We'll shut it off for them. And there'll be an article on Android Authority about this, and people will get really upset about it. 5 years down the road, and that'll be it. And then we'll move on. So
And then we can finally officially add Google Assistant to the
to
Google
yeah,
graveyard.
that Google
To let it
graveyard just grows bigger and bigger every year.
All right. So as we prepare to say our goodbyes to Google Assistant, another question we had on our mind is whether or not you should say goodbye to your existing phone and upgrade to a new phone powered by the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5. Because this chip is incredibly powerful. So we wanted to find out whether it lives up to the hype. So our Rob Triggs benchmarked it, put it through the works. He tested its performance in the CPU department and the GPU department in real world gamings. We run a bunch of different articles on it. And since we finally got our hands on retail hardware with this chipset, the super powerful Nubia Red Magic 11 Pro, which I believe like actually literally has liquid cooling in it. It's the first for an Android device to have actual liquid cooling in it. We decided to run some benchmarks. So in our testing, we found that, as expected, it is a very fast and powerful chip. It outperforms its predecessor, but also competitors like Google's Tensor G5, because of course it did, as well as MediaTek's Dimensity 9500. Um, the chip showed a 15% increase in single core performance and a 14% increase in multi core CPU performance over the Snapdragon 8 Elite. This is a pretty solid gain, but it does fall a bit short of Qualcomm's promised 20% increase in CPU performance that they marketed. And the GPU, on the other hand, shows a 15% increase in single core performance and a 14% increase. Sorry, that was that was the CPU. The GPU shows a 13.5% increase in the 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme test and a 17% increase in the ray tracing Solar Bay test compared to last year's chipset. However, this also doesn't meet Qualcomm's 23% promised marketing claim for the GPU and performance. But in terms of raw performance in comparison with other mobile chipsets, starting with the A19 Pro from Apple, the Snapdragon chip is slightly behind in single core CPU tasks, but it holds a pretty significant 16% lead in multi-core performance. In graphics, The Snapdragon chip is substantially faster, with performance ranging from 19 to 38% higher than the chip in the iPhone 17 Pro. Compared to the MediaTek Dimensity 9500, the Snapdragon leads it in CPU benchmarks, but is closer in the graphics department, with the 9500 even pulling ahead by about 1% in ray tracing performance. However, even with the fact that the Red Magic 11 Pro has insane liquid cooling, like, probably the most advanced cooling you can get on a smartphone right now, the chip still runs very hot. It peaks at 56 degrees Celsius. So while the overall stability and performance has improved with this thanks to the liquid cooling system, around 80% sustained stability, this suggests the chip can still struggle in phones with less robust cooling systems than the Red Magic 11 Pro. So, the main benefit for gaming appears to be more consistent performance over long sessions, rather than actually higher peak performance times. But, that will depend on the kind of phone that you have and whether or not it actually has a powerful cooling system. So, Scott, you've as the Pixel guy, I'm sure you're well acquainted with all all the controversies and the debates about the Tensors raw CPU and GPU performance, and how it's never really been a top contender for performance. But on the other side of things, you have Qualcomm, who is leading the pack in CPU and GPU performance, especially on the Android side of things. So, like, what do you think of these raw performance claims? Like, do you think people still really care about these claims that Qualcomm's putting out?
I don't. Well, first, let me say I don't think people are going to care that Qualcomm's numbers that it claimed at the beginning are the real world numbers are lower. I think that most people who visit sites like Android Authority and watch our YouTube channel and things like that, like they understand that the numbers that the company claims at the beginning are always going to be higher than what you're going to see in real world results. And I made a video for Android Authority going over the initial benchmarks that I took at Snapdragon Summit this year on a Qualcomm designed phone that was specifically created just to run benchmarks on. And I say in the video numerous times that, these numbers will be lower when these phones actually become real retail models. And there were multiple comments in there, people being like, you know, this is great. Like, this is really interesting information. Nobody was like, oh my God, like Qualcomm's lying to us. And it's like, I think people are smart enough to get that a benchmark from the company is always going to be higher. So I don't think people are going to be upset that, oh, it only hit whatever 14% gains instead of 20%. That's fine. I think people are going to be really upset about the heat. I think the heat is going to be a big deal. Um, I don't know. I don't know what we're going to see as far as things here in the United States, with phones that are coming here to the US. And I don't know what we're going to see from phones that do not, like you said, do not have that robust cooling system that we see in the phone, like the Nubias. So it's really going to be interesting to see because, yeah, okay, let's say you're a mobile gamer and you want to have better sustained peak performance on your games so that you can play longer and see better performance as you go. But if you can't hold on to the phone because it gets to 56 degrees Celsius, which is really, really hot, then what is the gain? Like, what have you gained really if you can play longer but you can't hold on to the phone to play?
Yeah.
That to me is that's a terrible trade-off. So I'm really interested to see, like you said, I'm interested to see what happens with phones that do not have literal liquid cooling in them. So I'm speaking specifically about like the OnePlus 15 and the upcoming Galaxy S26 series. Like,
Hmm.
what are those phones going to do with this chip? I don't know. Like, I feel like either the performance is going to have to come down even more. So instead of 14% gains, maybe we're at 10% gains to keep those thermals from going excessively high, or they're going to keep the same gains and the thermals are going to go way up. And I don't know. For me, I like, full disclosure, I am not a big mobile gamer, but at the same time, like, I understand the concept of holding a phone and playing a game. And if you can't hold the phone because it's literally burning
Yeah.
your fingers, how much of a how much of an advantage is that? So I mean, because 56 degrees Fahrenheit, I don't even know. I mean, sorry, I don't know what 56 degrees Celsius is in Fahrenheit, but it's a lot. It's like over 100 something degrees, right? I can't do the math, but it's very hot. It's hot enough that you would not want to hold it in your hand. So that's bad.
132 degrees. So yeah,
That's
that is very hot.
crazy. That's like that's nuts.
Although that's not, although I think I don't think that's like the skin temperature of the phone, like the actual temperature
No,
you
no,
feel when touching it. It's just the yeah,
but
still
still, that's
crazy hot.
hot. Yeah, that's and once again, and I know how Rob tests these phones. We have a very strict testing guideline here at Android Authority, and I won't go through all the protocols or anything, but it's very strict. You have to make sure the phone, you turn off the phone and you let it sit for 10, 20 minutes or whatever until it returns to a normal temperature, and then you rerun the tests, and you always make sure that it's like flat on a table, and it has to be in an environment that's not too hot, not too cold. Like we regulate these things very strictly, and so yeah, imagine if you're not under those very strict regimented situations and you're
Hmm.
playing your game outside in Phoenix, Arizona, or in India or wherever where it gets really hot. Now your phone is literally a toaster. Like, it's
Oh
bad.
yeah.
This is all bad. So yeah, it really is going to start coming down to what do gamers really want? Do they really want year over year gains at the with the acceptance that they're going to have to not literally not be able to hold their phone to do it? Like, I don't know, I just don't think that's going to fly. But I don't know, like I said, like I admit, 100% admit, I am
Hmm.
not a mobile gamer, so I can't really have much authority on this. But at the same time, like, I just don't think they're going to go for it, but we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I think the performance of Qualcomm's chips for many, many years has far exceeded the capabilities that Android is able to take advantage of. So,
Oh yeah, totally.
like you've been able to do far more. These chips are really, really, really capable, and we didn't really see exactly how capable they are until I think the recent trend of people running Windows games on their phones. Like I myself didn't realize exactly how powerful these chips are until I think someone like a Chinese YouTuber ran Black Myth Wukong. That's
Yeah.
like one of the highest end AAA games on his Red Magic 11 Pro with like a separate cooler and stuff like that. Like he was able to run that phone through emulation, and of course it's not running at 4K resolution. It was running at like 720p on like medium settings. But still, the fact that it's able to run this AAA PC game through emulation at reasonable frame rates, and it looks really good. Like the fact that that's even possible just shows how powerful these chipsets really are. They're just kind of held back by what you're able to do with Android and just the lack of AAA games on the system. So I think maybe that's one reason why Qualcomm has been really excited. Like why Cristiano Amon at Snapdragon Summit said he was like really excited about the Android on PC project because Qualcomm will finally have a platform it can actually properly use those chipsets in. You do have the Windows on ARM, but like it doesn't really feel like Microsoft has been taking its ARM side of things as seriously as Google does, because of course Android is primarily supporting ARM devices, whereas Microsoft has been trying for years to build up and convince developers to port their applications to ARM. The other side of things, Android is already almost every application supports ARM devices because that is by far the majority architecture among Android devices. So I'm really excited to see Android on PCs because then we'll finally have applications and devices that can actually take advantage of these super powerful Qualcomm chips.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the limitations of the chip and how Android itself doesn't take advantage of all the power that these chips present, but it's also the form factor. Like I was
Yeah.
explaining with the holding the phone to game. If you didn't have to hold the phone because it was in a standalone laptop shaped thing, then you would have the advantage of having not to hold it, not to touch it, and also the bigger form factor, more cooling, more fans, more things going on. So then all these limitations that Qualcomm is facing with continuously upping the ante every year when it comes to performance would not be there anymore. And so yeah, you could make a Snapdragon processor that really pushed the limits because the thermal presence would not be that big of a deal anymore. But yeah, but as it is, like, holding your little smartphone and playing, Black Myth Wukong, it's just not possible. Like, it's just not gonna happen because of the limitations of physics. And so yeah, I don't know. Qualcomm's gonna have to sort of figure it out. And the thing that the thing that Qualcomm is gonna be stuck on is is it can't stop, you know? Like it's
Yeah.
developed this entire reputation on always making it better every single year. More performance, more frames. Like that's what it does every single year. So it can't stop. If it stops, then everyone's going to be like, "Oh my god, Qualcomm's, it's over," you know? So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. You mentioned Tensor. Like Google's not really trapped in this situation with Tensor. Like Google could launch Tensor G6 and have it be, minorly, little tiny little bit better than last year, and you know, a lot of people will be upset about it, but the Pixel buyers won't be. They'll be like, yeah, cool, this is great. I like this. Whereas Qualcomm's kind of dug itself into a hole where it's like, okay, if we don't make our processor 20% better than last year, then we're dead in the water. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
No, I mean,
Physics is
that's
a
an
hard thing to
excellent
come
point.
over.
It's like it's actually an issue with Qualcomm's business model in general because like
Yeah.
they have to sell their chips to people. They have to sell their chips to smartphone manufacturers, tablet manufacturers, and other companies that want to make mobile devices. And they're not going to buy those chips if they're one, not good, and two, if they can't really market the fact that they're using those chips to consumers. Unlike with Google, Google is not selling the Tensor chip to anyone. Like they're not trying to find a buyer. They already have one. They're the only ones who are using their own chips, so they don't have to care about, oh, we have 30% year-on-year performance. We have the fastest CPU in the world. Like that doesn't really matter for them. If as long as it's good enough for their needs and fulfills their purpose of selling more Pixel phones, and I think that's all they really care about. Whereas with Qualcomm, they have to have these benchmark topping claims every year because otherwise they're not going to be able to market their chips as well, and people will lose interest in the Snapdragon brand. Like I see still, even to this day, there are people who associate MediaTek as like lower end, even though that hasn't been really true for a long time. MediaTek makes some really powerful chips, but people still associate Qualcomm with ultra premium, the highest, fastest performance gaming devices you can get on the Android side of things. So, if they lose that edge, fewer OEMs will stop buying their chips because fewer people will be interested in buying devices with those chips in them. So that will harm Qualcomm's business. So, yeah, they are kind of stuck in this endless cycle of improving things just so they can make new marketing claims, even if it's not really that necessary. Because what the heck on Android is even using all this power right now? Really nothing.
Yeah, and I don't know, like this would be an interesting thing to put in the comments under this video. If you're listening to this video or this podcast or watching this video, and you would you buy a smartphone knowing that in order to play the games you want to play, you would have to have a cooling system attached to it? Like obviously cooling systems, cooling system attachments for smartphones is not new. We've seen these for years and years and years now, but they've always been optional. They've always been something that you can optionally add if you want to play longer or play at a higher frame rate or do whatever. But if you had to have a cooling system attached to your phone to use it in the way that you want to use it, would that be an acceptable thing for you? Or would you rather slightly lower performance and being able to hold the phone in your hand just as normal? Like, I don't know. Like, let's see what people say. I'm interested. For all I know, people would just be like, "Oh yeah, totally. I have no problem like carrying around a cooling system with me wherever I go," or spending a ton of money on a phone that has a cooling system built into it that is, um, you know, super capable in that department or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I just can't imagine mobile gamers being like, "Yep, totally, no problem." I feel like they would rather have a couple of percentage points lower performance if they knew that they could just game like they normally game.
Right. And I'm also curious to know if you currently have a quote unquote gaming phone. I want to know, do you actually use the cooling attachment that a lot of them optionally come with or you have to buy? Like, do you actually use that when you game or do you just like the aesthetics of your gaming phone? Just like, I really do want to hear from you because, I have used gaming phones in the past. I have almost never used those cooling attachments because there just aren't many games that actually require them. As I feel like it's kind of overkill to slap the little cooler on and have that fan whir while I'm playing, I don't know, Fortnite or something. So, yeah, do let us know in the comments below. And for now, that's everything we've got for you this week. You can find links to all the stories mentioned in this episode down in the show notes, and you can find more amazing stories to read over on AndroidAuthority.com.
Thanks for listening to the Authority Insights podcast. We publish every week on YouTube, Spotify, and other podcast platforms. You can follow us everywhere on social media at Android Authority, and you can follow me personally on Instagram, Blue Sky, and my own YouTube channel at C. Scott Brown.
As for me, I'm on most social media platforms, posting day in and day out about Android. If you want to keep up with the latest in Android, follow me on X, Threads, Mastodon, or Telegram at Mishaal Rahman. Thanks for listening.